Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, has been saying some absolutely insane stuff recently, like that he's a Nazi, or how he gave his 6-year-old cousin head. But what's somehow even crazier is the allegation that I'm talking about within this video, as it very well could be a significant factor behind his recent spike in erratic behavior. As of May 1st, 2025, Ye put in a notice that he's suing his former dentist, Thomas P. Connolly, in regards to malpractice based around NAGs, or nitrous oxide as it's called medically. The thing is, this is one of the Nightmare Blunt Rotation video scripts that I've written the large majority of well before I released my Drake video back in September of 2024, because Milo Yiannopoulos had released these claims in August. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Ryan Garcia, this Ye, I'm on the Nitrous.
To begin, let's briefly look over what little information TMZ reported on recently. TMZ writes that Ye's lawyer, Andrew Chakaski, had sent a notice stating the intention to sue to Thomas P. Connolly, who began being a dentist for Ye in early 2024. TMZ continues stating that Ye's reasoning for the lawsuit was malpractice from Thomas P. Connolly, in which he would continue to give Ye nitrous oxide despite signs of severe neurological damage beginning to show. According to Ye's legal team, when Thomas saw the negative consequences of Ye's NAG dependency, Thomas abandoned Ye without giving him the proper care to transition off of the nitrous oxide. This all in all is stated to have caused physical, psychological, and financial harm to Ye, as well as his partner Bianca Sensori, who is stated to have lost out on the companionship due to the addiction. TMZ goes on to say that they have reached out to Thomas P. Connolly but were yet to receive a response. Additionally, at the end here, it does look like they mentioned Milo Yiannopoulos' allegation from August of 2024, however the writing is very vague and doesn't mention any dates. Also, it includes next to none of the claims or information from Milo. All TMZ states is that Milo, 1, said Ye started bringing up nitrous oxide in meetings a lot, 2, that it caused him to have unpredictable moods and give incomprehensible instructions to employees, and 3rd but not least, that Thomas P. Connolly was selling nitrous oxide to Ye. Now, TMZ seems biased as fuck to me, which there may actually be an explanation for that I will address later. The reason I say biased though is because of how they added the point that Thomas P. Connolly denied the claims back in August. TMZ notably linked to the article that was written at the time, and let me just say, it clearly attempts to paint Milo in a bad light, which fair I guess, but it also doesn't even look like they read what Milo's claims were. There was a bunch of stuff they left out. For example, there is even a hacker associated with Thomas by the name of Kiba who is leaking information to Milo. There is a lot that a hacker can find out about a person by searching their name online. If you try Googling yourself, you may even find your own information listed by a data broker, which, while can be concerning, is where this video's sponsor, Aura, comes in to provide a solution. Aura is an all-in-one internet privacy and security service that provides 24/7 protection against data brokers, which are companies that collect people's data to sell to marketers or even scammers and stalkers. Data brokers are legally required to remove your data if you ask, however it can be a confusing and difficult process to make the request, which Aura also handles for you after they discover if a data broker has your data. Aura additionally comes with a credit score tracker, password manager, antivirus to keep your devices safe, and a VPN which can allow you to access region-locked content. Try Aura free for 14 days at aura.com/lawcross to discover where your data is being exposed and sold. And thank you once again to Aura for sponsoring this video.
Nitrous don't help me, it just put me in a trance.
In early August 2024, Milo Yiannopoulos, Ye's ex-manager, began posting numerous tweets about how Ye was being permanently drugged and subsequently brain damaged by his new manager, Eric Quay, with the assistance of celebrity dentist Thomas P. Connolly. For reference, on top of being Ye's ex-manager, maybe current, I'm not really sure, I'll explain later, Milo was the guy who put Ye in contact with Nick Fuentes and then subsequently Trump, so he is connected, especially to Ye. Despite Milo's generally deranged views, grifting, and, well, dishonesty, I don't think what he says should be written off entirely, now more than ever, when considering the fact that Ye is now suing Thomas P. Connolly for seemingly these exact claims. Just do be dubious, because I am fairly certain he claims a lot of stuff that he cannot prove as fact. He just kind of repeats the stuff that Kiba, the hacker, told him uncritically, without any need of evidence being provided on Kiba's side of things, which he doesn't always. I will show you the evidence in the instances that it is available to me, which is remarkably often now that I've gotten in contact with Milo Yiannopoulos via email. Even still though, there are some discrepancies which I will point out. Another thing I want to note is the fact that Milo clearly has absolutely no regard for doxing both himself and the people that he's talking about. In fact, it kind of feels like he went out of his way to do it. So all of the censoring was added by me. I shit you not, he added absolutely zero. The way most people found out about this allegation at the time, including myself, was through this infographic, which started getting spread around by Ye fan pages the same day that Milo began releasing his tweets. I think this is because Milo had been leaking the information to the Ye fan pages as he had done in the past with the now banned @Kanye's Post Instagram account. To be perfectly honest, when I first saw this, I could not take it seriously. To initiate such serious but also questionable claims with the tagline of "disappointed with vultures" are just so fucking goofy to me. Regardless, Milo tweeted out over 30 times about the allegations, including evidence of legal proceedings in the form of an affidavit in which he made the claims under oath. Side note, Milo fucking lives on Twitter. As of the 21st of August, when I was writing this script, Jesus, I had to scroll for well over 20 minutes just to reach the 8th of August, so thank fuck I saved all of those tweets at the time. Regardless, Milo opens the first tweet stating that it is his belief that Thomas P. Connolly has intentionally gotten Ye hooked on Nangs in an attempt to diminish his mental faculties so Thomas and his associates can extract millions out of Ye. Just so you could understand how this would even work, I think it's worth noting the detrimental effects of nitrous oxide, or more specifically, prolonged nitrous oxide usage. It's safe when administered by professionals as they supplement it with the correct amount of oxygen, and you can recreationally take it and not risk irreparable brain damage, not that I necessarily recommend you do. If nitrous oxide is administered without enough oxygen, it can cause suffocation, heart attacks, or seizures. If frequently and consistently consumed, it can damage your spinal cord and brain by depleting your B12 vitamin. This can result in psychosis, depression, limb spasms, memory loss, erratic behavior, mood swings, paranoia, and more. A lot of the symptoms of nitrous oxide abuse are remarkably similar to those of Ye's bipolar, which makes it especially detrimental to him because they can amplify each other and make it harder for other people to identify what's going on. By the way, to reach such damaging levels of nitrous oxide abuse with just like Nangs, balloons, and a cracker would be a monumental feat. This is more referring to the usage of nitrous oxide with a medical delivery system and surgical canisters. Now that that's clear, Milo states that when he discovered what was going on earlier in 2024, Ye intentionally blew up their relationship by stating he was going to do porn, which resulted in Milo resigning. Supposedly, this was some kind of pre-arranged agreement that Milo would quit if Ye did porn again. Only at Yeezy, I guess. The most important detail in the initial claims, however, is the aforementioned affidavit, which details Milo sharing his findings to the California court under oath. The purpose of the affidavit was to serve as support for Milo's complaint that he filed against Thomas to the California Dental Board. This is due to the significant detail that if he were to lie under oath, he risked being charged with perjury. Now, my understanding of it is that someone has to actually push this issue for Milo to undergo that risk of being charged with perjury, and I can't imagine the California court or California Dental Board is going to exactly bother doing that. But considering Milo's posting these documents online, this would be the perfect evidence for Thomas P. Connolly to go after Milo for defamation if he is lying, which after almost a year now and one legal threat, that is yet to happen.
Think I'm stuck in a matrix when I fucked my nitrous.
Milo makes it extremely clear throughout the affidavit that he spent the large majority of his time managing Ye, just cutting off leeches off of his empire, supposedly saving Ye upwards of $30 million. To be specific, in the instance of Thomas P. Connolly, Milo alleges that Thomas charged Ye upwards of $50,000 a month for dental services, in which he illegally supplied Ye with absurd quantities of nitrous oxide. For example, the 4 surgical-sized containers that allegedly Thomas himself was spotted moving into Ye's apartment, which he notably moved himself in next door to using Ye's funds, later lying about it, which I'll talk about later. Supposedly, Thomas continued to supply Ye with nitrous oxide gas well after the first concerning symptoms of nitrous oxide abuse were present, and even left Ye with instructions on how to operate the delivery system and canisters, encouraging him to use it in the absence of a professional anesthesiologist, despite Ye's history with addiction and mental illness. Milo further claims that Thomas threatened Milo with violence when he failed to secure a $200,000 USD per month consultancy agreement, and he also states that he received 2 testimonies from Thomas's business associate. One alleges that Thomas scams his celebrity and athlete client base by charging them for natural diamonds when in reality they are cheap lab-grown diamonds that he charges a 15,000% markup on. And the second supposed testimony states that Thomas has a debt of more than 2 million USD to a Mexican cartel, and as a result they own a surgical practice in Beverly Hills, using it to launder money. Additionally, Milo also has a written confession from Thomas stating that his 2 most recent bankruptcies were filed illegally, in order to avoid tax, and a much larger court judgment pertaining to a life-altering surgical fuck-up he made on a woman's mouth. Milo says that he himself was introduced to Thomas as the dentist who was assisting Ye in the design and installation of his 850,000 USD titanium prosthodontics. Ye, on the other hand, met Thomas through a guy called Billy Walsh, who had been paid 1 million USD for his work on Vulture's Volume 1, despite the fact that he supposedly could not name a single track he worked on when questioned by Yeezy staff. Milo also describes how Thomas attempted to bring in a green grocer by the name of Joe Welsh in order to run the retail side of Yeezy. However, Joe ended up asking for a compensation package that amounted to well over 10 million USD. And when Milo asked for evidence that he had charged us for his services in the past, he could not provide it. This is the point at which Milo began paying close attention to Thomas, beginning to build his case. Thomas went on to state that his former associate Joe Welsh was dead to him and then comically offered to run the Yeezy finances himself with a 5-step plan that went as follows. Step 1, get a sustainable income without debt or investors. aka just make money, bro. Step 2, solidify the long-term vision in a one-on-one conversation with Ye in which they make notes with dates and images. aka sit there brainstorming delusional, unachievable goals for the company with accompanying napkin drawings from Ye. Step 3, again, talk to Ye and solidify the short-term plan for the company. aka continue to sit there brainstorming delusional and unachievable goals. Step 4, get Milo to try and figure out a way to achieve at least some of the delusional dreams. Step 5, get Milo to do all the work in executing his actionable plan. Bear in mind that Thomas insisted he could not accept anything less than 2.4 million USD a year in compensation for his consultancy, which is fucking hilarious to me because this looks like the type of plan you'd read from a 15-year-old business studies student who's trying to offload the group project onto his classmates. When this first plan was not accepted, Thomas came back with an amended one which included some primary goals. Or more specifically, number 1, build the drone, number 2, personal use N202 system, and number 3, build the Yeezy car. For almost a year, I've wondered what the fuck the drone is, but as of yesterday while writing this, Ye released this low resolution as hell image supposedly displaying the plan. And let's just say, Ye, I am not disappointed. This is sick, bro. Anyway, it was at this point that Ye's dependency to Nitrous was becoming especially clear to Milo. And by April, employees at all levels of Yeezy were supposedly expressing concern. There's a video in which Ye spoke to MMA fighter Ryan Garcia about the Nitrous, which is supposedly also from about this time.
Ryan Garcia, this Ye, I'm on the Nitrous.
Milo even claims that Ye would insist on Milo calling Thomas Tom instead of the dentist. The most questionable but damning claims from this period of time pertain to the 4 surgical grade nitrous oxide canisters that Thomas was supposedly dragging into the apartment of Ye's girlfriend, Bianca Sensori. Milo states that a junior staff member at Yeezy had photographed the incident, and as much as 5 other Yeezy employees had also photographed the medical delivery system installation process. Where these photographs are, or if they even exist, I have no idea. Milo didn't put them on his Twitter, nor did he link to them in the affidavit. Bizarrely, when Thomas was confronted about this, he supposedly said that the canisters were and always had been empty. Allegedly, a long-standing vendor told Milo about how casually Thomas was talking about putting Ye under for no apparent medical reason. Milo backs the statement up by sharing that a bill was received and paid at Yeezy for well over 61,000 USD, which, as I will address, is supposedly only one of many. Milo also claims to have had a phone call with a Yeezy employee who wished to remain anonymous, so the statement's basically fucking worthless, but I'll share it anyway. The employee said that they had directly witnessed Ye self-administering the nitrous oxide, and they could not say if a regulator was in use or what proportion of oxygen, if any, was being supplemented. If what Milo is saying is true, I'd say it's pretty fucking illegal, because there is at minimum 2 laws being broken when accounting for all that has been said. Well, I mean, and when you also disregard the whole laundering money for the cartel thing, but that's a whole nother ordeal. More specifically, the laws that forbid the excessive prescribing or administering of drugs or treatment, and the failure to use a failsafe machine with an appropriate exhaust system in the administering of nitrous oxide. This was also apparently around the time that Thomas took the liberty of moving himself in next door to Ye with Ye's cash. Ye had previously asked Milo to negotiate for another apartment within the complex for the purposes of being used as a studio. However, before the negotiations were complete, a pending charge on Ye's American Express card showed that 6 months' rent had been paid in advance to the building manager. When Milo questioned Thomas about this, Thomas claimed to be moving in at his own expense, with the American Express charge later being refunded. There are also a multitude of other payment records from Yeezy LLC that show hundreds of thousands of US dollars being paid to Thomas, with the payments being marked as for dental work. Specifically, Milo cites a $257,000 payment on January 7th, 2024, followed by another $61,040 charge 2 weeks later on January 29th, 2024. Again, both of these were marked as dental work, and there were supposedly only 2 of many. Later in the year, in March of 2024, there was an attempted sale of over $1 million worth of Yeezy Gap merchandise from a warehouse owned by a friend and patient of Thomas, or more specifically, a guy by the name of Dominic Chambrone. Dominic claims to have been fully exonerated by the LAPD, however, Milo states that this does not mean he isn't guilty, as there is still an investigation being conducted by the FBI. Most alarmingly, however, Eric Quay, a personal assistant employed by Yeezy, had told several online fan groups in June of 2024 that Ye had gotten a head scan which revealed permanent brain damage from prolonged usage of nitrous oxide. Milo, however, also notes that Eric has a reputation of being untrustworthy and has not seen evidence for the scan. A little bit ironic coming from Milo, but whatever. There's also that hacker associated with Thomas by the name of Kiba, who was leaking information to Milo that I mentioned at the beginning. Other than Milo himself, Kiba was clearly Milo's primary source throughout all of this, which I assume comes down to the fact that 1, he was supposedly Thomas's business partner, and 2, apparently a hacker who had the contents of Thomas's phone. The issue is, from my judgment after reading his messages with Milo, Kiba is very clearly an unreliable narrator and evidence-shy individual. So for Milo to lean so heavily on his statements seems extremely foolish to me, if not outright dishonest. Milo himself acknowledges this in the messages with Kiba, yet still decided to push the claims anyway. Don't get me wrong, Kiba's statements aren't wholly worthless. I mean, he did work with Thomas. The issue is, if he does have evidence for all of his statements, he's not providing a lot of it. I mean, Milo could have solely used the screenshots from either his own conversation with Thomas or even Kiba's conversation with Thomas, rather than pushing the unverified Kiba claims, and it would look a hell of a lot less suspicious than right now. For example, Kiba was the one who claimed that Thomas owed the Sinaloa cartel with next to no evidence. Specifically, Kiba claimed that Thomas had done work on one of the cartel boss's son's teeth, which led to him asking them for money and falling into debt. This is what led to the cartel supposedly acquiring his dentistry practice and using it as a business to launder money through. Kiba was also the source of the unverified claim that Thomas was scamming his celebrity client base by giving them lab-grown diamonds while selling them at the price of real diamonds for a 15,000% markup. Apparently, this scam was personal to Kiba because he himself was a victim of it, and when he found out, he claims that Thomas paid him $367,000 in cash, a redo of his teeth, his wife's teeth done, and 49% ownership of a business I'll talk about later in order to keep him quiet about the scam. The issue is that Kiba believes Thomas did a shoddy job in applying the diamonds to his wife's teeth, so I guess that's what upset him. That, and he believes that Milo would be a better client for his hacking services or whatever the fuck he actually does. Milo, seemingly of his own accord, then attached this diamond scam allegation in his affidavit to another one of Thomas's celebrity clients, or more specifically, Lil Yachty, which still remains in both versions of the affidavit. Oh yeah, if you're not paying attention to my visual editing, which a little hurtful, but fair enough, I guess. There are 2 versions of the affidavit. There is a version that was released by Milo onto Twitter back in August of 2024, and there is a version that I got access to when he shared the drive full of evidence with me. My first question is, why? I mean, the newest version that he shared to me in the drive does not have any additional claims from what I can tell, but Milo has clearly removed information from it. That surely cannot be a legally binding affidavit anymore, right? I mean, it's not to say that the claims on either document are false or lacking in evidence, but it is to say that Milo very clearly wanted to remove some of the claims from the original Twitter version of the affidavit, which, yeah, it kind of implies that some of the claims were false or lacking in evidence. I mean, regardless, if Thomas wanted to sue Milo for defamation, both versions of his affidavit would be functional for that purpose, considering he hand-signed every page. Either way, my main point is that one of the claims that was not removed from the newest version of the affidavit was the implication that Thomas P. Connolly pulled the diamond scam on Lil Yachty. Yachty got the diamonds permanently installed into his teeth for a fee of $1,050,000 USD, and it could be especially costly costly to go through the procedure of checking them for their legitimacy. The reason this would be especially costly is because they would have to be removed in order to do the scans and checks that ensure their legitimacy, which could cost 6 figures in its own right. This is bizarre to me though, because I do have the vague recollection of Lil Yachty refuting this claim back in August of 2024. However, that led to a bizarre rabbit hole of its own. I could not find any evidence of Yachty refuting the claim, other than a couple Redditors who referred to it. But I do distinctly recall it was based around the idea that Yachty brought his own diamonds to the procedure and therefore couldn't be scammed by Thomas by buying Thomas's diamonds. The conclusion I came to was that if Lil Yachty did indeed refute this claim, it was in the form of an Instagram story that miraculously got deleted before anyone screenshot it. However, I think it's a lot safer to err on the side that it was most likely just a rumor spread by Redditors. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong though. Regardless, Kiba claims that Thomas continued to receive the $61,000 checks from Ye up until at least August of 2024 when Milo wrote the affidavit, which he used to go on flights around Europe to places like Paris or Florence. Another one of Kiba's claims is that Thomas had paid him a 5-figure sum in order to take down Ye fan pages that had been critical of Thomas in June of 2024. Thomas further attempted to persuade Kiba to hack into Milo's phone and even inquired about Kiba physically harming Milo due to the $200,000 per month consultancy being declined. Somewhat unsurprisingly, Kiba refused to do either of these acts.
What? Where we go?
Thomas isn't the only person that Milo claims was manipulating Ye. In this same affidavit, he addresses a guy called Paul Johnson who supposedly sold Ye a Damien Hirst sculpture for a fee of 6 million USD that Milo claims at most could have been worth 2 million USD.
Yeah, what the fuck are you screaming about?
Following this, Paul Johnson continued to claim millions of dollars a year from Ye for the service of supposedly managing his archive. However, during Johnson's tenure, multiple items personal to Ye went missing, including but not limited to his Grammys, multiple items from his children's birth, and most infamously, his mother Donda's death certificate. Milo further alleges that Paul drunkenly bragged about insider trading with former CEO Matt George to make millions buying Gap stock before the Yeezy partnership was publicly revealed. It was when Paul asked for and received his entire 2024 salary in advance a few weeks before Milo took over that resulted in his consultancy being terminated, because he also lied to Milo about it, stating that it was Ye's idea to pay him his entire salary in advance. That was all just from the affidavit, so all of the claims that Milo has made that he was willing to back at risk of being held legally accountable. There has been further evidence shared on Twitter by Milo, and I think it's notable how differently he speaks about Ye's current manager, Eric Quay, in comparison to the affidavit. More specifically, he states that Eric is a foolish yes man who is in leagues with the dentist, Thomas, further elaborating that it is of his belief that anyone who has accepted cash from Ye since May of 2024 without also being clear about making steps to help Ye out of his current condition is an enabler and abuser. That's all well and good, but where Milo begins to lose credibility, at least in my eyes, is when he begins to post TikToks like this that draw parallels between Thomas's first celebrity client, Post Malone, and the late Amy Winehouse. The reason I question it is because Amy Winehouse's cause of death was alcohol, and as far as I'm concerned, the Post Malone footage is clip-chimped, with him acting relatively normal before and after that performance. I suppose what is notable though is not only the fact that Post Malone was Thomas's first celebrity client, but also the artist that Eric Quay worked for before working with Ye. Eric Quay did respond to these allegations on Instagram with a few stories stating that the timeline described happened before he took over Milo's role at Yeezy, and he is not and has not worked with any dentists. Eric also states that he has never used nitrous oxide and has never asked anyone to use it, which Really? I mean, it's very well possible that Eric has no personal experience with nitrous oxide, but it seems a bit redundant to bring up when the allegations are centered around the artist he's managing and not him. If anything, Eric bringing it up just seems like a desperate bid to distance himself from the allegation and remove responsibility. It just makes me doubt the claim. I mean, Eric is supposed to be a manager at the top of the music industry. That does seem like the correct type of crowd to be doing nangs with, but what do I know? Regardless, Milo posted a couple of these stories alongside some leaked DMs between assumedly himself and Eric, in which Eric states that he spoke to Ye the day of the Justin LeBoy interview, and Ye had shared to him that he was off the nitrous oxide, having had one of those surgical grade canisters dropped off to him.
Let's jump right in. We saw you and your wife out at Disney. Next, we see reports of a battery charge as a result of your wife being sexually assaulted. Wifey, okay, what happened? How important is it for you to protect your loved ones?
Yeah, I mean, it's just. What's the question you want? How important it is, or what happened?
Bear in mind that this interview was released at least as of April 24th, which was a month before Eric took over Milo's position at Yeezy. This directly contradicts Eric's story in which he states he couldn't have been involved because it all occurred before he was at the company. Not really related, but Milo also exposed Eric as an Obi-ho, as he stated that when Ye and Drake had beef, Eric went round to Drake's place to help them sell off all the Yeezy merch, and he described them as a loyal family, which does seem a bit ironic considering the allegations I talked about in my Drake video, but whatever. Also, that aforementioned Kanye's Post Instagram account was supposedly taken down because Eric Quay had paid Kiba to do so around the time that Drake and Ye were beefing. Comically, Milo also shared these screenshots in which Eric Quay was communicating with a person pretending to be Thomas. Milo claims that this is evidence of Eric lying about not working with any dentists, but I can't draw that conclusion because I don't think there is any indication more than the friendly language that Eric thought he was speaking to Thomas, the dentist. Speaking of Thomas, let's talk about his response, shall we? As of August 12th, 2024, Thomas P. Connolly's spokesperson released a response in the form of a TMZ post. Fuck knows why a dentist needs a spokesperson, but regardless, he of course refuted all the claims. This directly led to Milo responding with, in my opinion, the most unsettling piece of evidence in this entire case, assuming it isn't fabricated. It's in the form of some chat logs from a group including Thomas, Milo, and Ye. It appears the exchange begins with Thomas sharing designs for the nitrous oxide delivery system, followed by Milo questioning Joe Welsh, the grocer's aforementioned 10 million USD compensation package. Thomas goes on to send the message, "This needs to be a long-term goal, get recreational nitrous legalized, meanwhile we master the delivery system with a 2-year head start," which was a message that Ye reacted to with a heart. Milo responds stating, "Surely you're joking. Prolonged misuse of nitrous causes birth defects, problems with B12, your spinal cord disintegrates. Why would anyone want to introduce another drug to an already depressed, addicted, demoralized, and apathetic population of dopamine slaves?" Clearly, considering this profound statement, Ye responds saying, "Can I have the nitrous today? Tom, you said you'd bring them by today. Checking in." Tom then asks if he is at the chateau and says yes. As Milo notes, the chateau is synonymous with drug-fueled celebrity debauchery, even being the site of a few overdoses. I'll talk about it more later, but I'm pretty sure attempts like this from Milo to sensationalize the story are a massive part of why it was overlooked. Either way, I can't forget to mention that Thomas responded to Milo's last message with a ha-ha reaction. This shit is actually demonic. I mean, like, I couldn't write a fucking darker narrative if I tried. I mean, for fuck's sake. Ye even has Golden Freddy as his profile picture in these messages. This seems like an intentional attempt at drawing a comparison. That's right, I'm learning Five Nights at Freddy's lore for this fucking allegation research. I'm pretty sure whoever set his profile picture to Golden Freddy were attempting to draw an analogy to Ye's current alleged state, as Ye has used a bear to represent himself in his earlier discography as seen on Graduation or College Dropout. Golden Freddy, the character, is a child trapped in a animatronics body that's fallen into a state of disrepair. I'm not sure how iPhones work, so I don't know if it was Milo, the guy who took the screenshot, who set Ye's profile picture to that, or if it was Ye himself, but either way, Milo clearly took a liking to using Golden Freddy to represent Ye. This is shown by this deranged tweet in which Milo states states that he's going to mail a Golden Freddy toy to Thomas P. Connolly's children. This is a part of what I mean by sensationalizing the story. Milo is already an extraordinarily controversial figure, and he's shown himself in the past to be an unreliable narrator. He has genuinely compelling pieces of evidence, yet he still decides to cite frankly deluded TikToks and inject elements of personal drama. It is no shock to me that the large majority of people wrote this off as attention-seeking behavior, because as of this point in time, and fuck, even 2 weeks after he released the allegations, it became nigh impossible to access any of the compelling evidence because it's buried in his fucking Twitter history. Or in a Google Drive that you need to request access for. Overall, the narrative of my video did not change in the slightest after reading through all the evidence that he provided, so I didn't feel the need to rewrite everything. What I do feel the need to add though is a segment addressing some of the tidbits of information that I found online and going through all the new information from Milo that he provided to me in the drive, because I've never seen some of it before and I don't think it's public.
Like, Aiden is cool as fuck.
Did he fuck the porn star, the one with the big titty or something?
Who, Aiden?
Yeah,
Definitely.
what's her name?
Who did Aiden fuck?
Got Nitrous, bro. I can't fucking.
So yeah, first up we got these clips of Ye on Sneako's stream, I think it is. The one you just saw was Ye trying to remember the name of a girl that Aiden Ross had slept with. However, he couldn't, and he blamed that on nitrous oxide.
Nitrous when I was at Donda.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize how long I had been like doing nitrous, but now it definitely has affected my memory. But the funny thing is, God can use my memory, but that's not what he need. He need my channel. He need you. He need you. What are you two gentlemen's name again? Corey.
Reggie.
Yeah. And what's your name again? No.
Mr. Digital Nas.
Man, that joke is just corny, bro. I gotta just like rewind and unstream that.
There's also this one from May 5th in which Ye banned drugs and alcohol from the household.
But one thing I want to start with is like we gotta clean the house up. No drugs and alcohol. We're gonna do it here. You know, right?
Yeah.
Gotta clean it up. This is beautiful. Almost feels like, not almost feels like something that God presented.
Yeah.
And we needed this. We needed this engineering. We need to.
I mean, is it even his house? I guess so. No one seems bothered by it. Moving on from the clips, there is also this New York Post article from February 20th, 2025, in which they report that Ye has relapsed on the nitrous. I'm not exactly sure what period of time he was off of the nitrous oxide for, but this article implies that it was for the duration of his 6-month trip to Japan throughout late 2024. Either way, New York Post cites a bunch of unnamed sources, so no idea if they actually vet them to check if they're legit, but whatever. I'm assuming this big company is probably doing so. The first one, who is supposedly a friend of Ye, claims that when Ye came back to LA from his 6-month trip to Japan in January, he'd got some dental work done, and that's when the supposed friend believes that Ye relapsed on nitrous oxide. New York Post then cites a second source who reiterates the point that nitrous oxide has been a massive issue for Ye and his wife, Bianca Sensori's relationship. I honestly somehow did not realize that they were married until now, but yeah, okay. Assumedly the same source also claimed that nitrous oxide is at large in LA, and then I guess goes on to imply that after the Grammy party on February 2nd, Ye started doing nitrous oxide again, which she never did in Japan. A third source stated that there is an issue with nitrous in Ye's dentist, with the medication Ye's having right now leading to his current meltdown. The final source they cite, New York Post claims is a previous Yeezy employee. This ex-employee claims that Ye is very easily influenced, partly because his memory is extraordinarily fucked up to the extent that he would forget conversations or people he had worked with closely within the span of a few days. The supposed former employee went on to say that you could just convince Ye of anything if you say it with enough conviction at the time, and he won't fact check it. Moving on from the sources, the article notably goes on to state that Ye had rehired Milo Yiannopoulos as his manager, which I guess is still the case, considering in the email to me, Milo said that he had been consulted by Ye. Consulted on what, you may be wondering? Well, it is kind of funny to me because the one thing I asked Milo for, that being the photo of Thomas P. Connolly dragging the surgical-grade nitrous canister into Ye's apartment was the one thing that Milo didn't provide, and he claims that's on Ye's instruction. I mean, for fuck's sake, I know where Thomas lives, the 3 cars that he owns and drives, his and his friends, family, fucking neighbors' phone numbers. Similar goes for Kiba, none of which is information I requested, wanted, or will be showing you. There was some useful stuff provided though, the examples you've already seen being Thomas's bankruptcy lawsuit, resume and job description, Milo's resignation letter, and the text between Milo, Thomas, Ye, Kiba, Joe Welsh, and Billy. Otherwise, apparently one of Milo's, I guess, anonymous sources was Gavin McInnes, which it isn't really of any relevance. I just thought it was kind of funny. It's kind of like the H3H3 subreddit cameo that appears in the Milo and Kiba messages. One actually notable thing that it couldn't work into the pre-existing script though was Thomas's business scheme, Breath Elite. This was first brought up by Thomas on May 30th, who was saying that they should sell the product on the Yeezy website. Now what's fucking wild is that Breath Elite is allegedly the company that Thomas gave Kiba 49% ownership of as a part of the deal to keep him silent about the diamond scam. Kiba went on to leak screenshots to Milo that were also from around May 30th, which is seemingly when the business was established. Within, you can see Thomas shared this promotional material and they discussed some sort of contract. There's about 11 pages of promotional material and yeah, they're pretty reminiscent of that proposed consultancy agreement, which might I add, Milo did actually provide evidence for. Another piece of material leaked by Kiba to Milo is a 56-page business license application. Unless I'm missing something, I don't think Milo brought up Breath Delete LLC first in his conversations with Kiba and Thomas, which I guess would make sense considering they're the supposed co-owners. Kiba showed that he had a container of it to Milo and commented that he wouldn't even feed it to his dog and it looked remarkably like MDMA, which yeah, it definitely does. Also, brief side note, but these 97 pages of messages between Kiba and Milo are genuinely some of the most bizarre and bipolar messages I've ever read in my life. The conversation starts with Kiba threatening Milo, talking about how he's gonna hack him or something. And then I guess they befriend each other, or at least they're both trying to play each other. This goes on for the majority of the messages, with them teeter-tottering between seemingly passive or just straight up aggression to absurd glazing and race-based banter, eventually culminating in what I can only describe as an insane crash out. Either way, in regards to the Breath Elite stuff, whether or not it was a scam or useless product or Thomas's golden ticket to Ye's fortunes is not really important to me. What is important is that Milo finding out about it was seemingly bad for Thomas because it was a big part of what drove Milo to begin tweeting about the situation, as you can see in this screenshot. You see what else is there? Kiba suggesting that Milo just get Ye to sue Thomas instead of turning it into a social media war. Considering the current lawsuit, how impressionable Ye has reportedly been of late, and the fact that Milo is apparently managing him again, it seems extraordinarily likely to me that that is exactly what happened. I am getting the impression that Milo is using this cause to further his own personal vendettas against these people, but he's also seemingly the only person who's helping Ye out with his nitrous addiction, so lesser of two evils, I guess. At this point, he has provided me with a lot of the evidence that he mentioned in the affidavit. The one thing I just can't get over though is that photo, the photo of Thomas with the 4 surgical nitrous oxide canisters. That is something that is relevant again momentarily. Back to the messages with Kiba, Milo went to speak to TMZ at this point, and it looks as if he made a move to cut Kiba out of the situation, which is what led to the mutual crash out. Before it went off the rails, however, Kiba did get the opportunity to ask Milo about the photo and expressed his disbelief at its existence. Milo responded by stating that he thinks he would just take the Kiba approach and just constantly refer to stuff that he never shows, which I mean, I guess he's done that, but like, as Kiba also says, if the photo existed and Milo had it, there is a low as fuck likelihood he could keep it from going public. The guy can't help but repeatedly dox himself and others. I don't see why he is so cagey about this photo unless it doesn't exist. That also seems bizarre to me though, because in Milo's messages to Thomas, you can see Thomas claim that the nitrous oxide canisters were empty and they always had been, which is exactly what Milo claimed Thomas's rebuttal was in the affidavit. It's not like Thomas was denying moving the surgical canisters, whether they were empty or not, into Ye's apartment. Well, Up until his spokesperson made that statement to TMZ, of course. That does bring me to a different point though. Fuck modern journalism, specifically TMZ in this instance. What kind of dog shit company do you have to be to have all of these claims and evidence for weeks only to proceed to do what I can only describe as a heavily biased and malicious one-sided coverage of an allegation this serious? They didn't even mention Milo's claims, for fuck's sake. Sure, you can disregard all the deranged shit he says and even preface that everything should be taken with a grain of salt, but to not even display any of the evidence that he presented is fucking absurd to me. I mean, TMZ is in leagues with game journalists like Dex Zerto at this point. Milo claims that this clear bias is down to an unverified claim from one of Thomas's business partners who said that Harvey Levin, the founder of TMZ, apparently works out with Thomas. Regardless, as I've said numerous times, just due to the sheer insanity of these claims and Milo's pre-established reputation, it was kinda hard to take these claims at face value. However, upon reading Milo's affidavit, the evidence he presents alongside it on Twitter, the lackluster response from those accused, and now to top it off, the fucking lawsuit, it seems to me as if Ye is surrounded by both pure incompetence and truly evil, malicious people who want nothing more than to rinse him of his millions. Ye has most definitely consumed a metric shitload of nitrous oxide. Now, whether or not Thomas P. Connolly is criminally negligent for supplying it or how much legal fault he actually holds, I cannot say. Although Ye is clearly mentally ill, he is a fully grown adult and can decide for himself whether he wants to consume nitrous oxide. And it doesn't exactly explain all the deranged behavior he's exhibited of late. Even with that considered though, if the allegations are true, Thomas supplying Nangs in industrial quantities to a mentally ill addict for large sums of money does seem unbecoming of someone with a dentistry license. Anyway, that's enough of Milo's seemingly 1v9ing mid lane for Ye's soul. There was one thing that I thought was interesting, and that is the fact that Ye himself has been hinting at the concept of a nitrous addiction for quite a while now. Well, actually about since I started writing this video. I've noticed he talks about it in his new songs, as you've seen in the chapter title segments, but he also mentions it on his Twitter in between the, well, shit. The issue is, he has deleted all of his tweets since before April 15th, 2025. So the only example I have is this screenshot of a track list he tweeted out, which notably had number 18 being Nitrous Addict. Anyway, next up in the list of topics is pirate software, and then we'll probably be back with Just a Robot. So thank you for watching. Like or dislike the video depending on how you felt about it. Feel free to leave a comment with feedback or criticism. Subscribe with the notification bell hit to be notified of my future uploads. And thank you to the two big dogs who have generously paid for a membership to my channel, Miss Fox McCoy and No Dose. I have you to thank for my continued existence.